All right. So we are live now on YouTube and X. Um, the point of this video is because Arcade to Earn is having their token generation event coming real soon, early April. We'll get into that soon. But first, if you don't know him, this is JP. This is the CEO of Arcade. JP, how you doing today?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah, this will be a good one. I'm hoping we don't make this too long. I want to make this short and sweet. We got the topics over here on the right. If you're watching this live and you have any questions, throw them in the chat. If they're related to the current topic, then I'll bring them up. If they're not related, then we'll bring it up when we get to that the section at the bottom, live questions.
Yeah.
Um, so why don't we just get started? For anyone who doesn't know what arcade is and what you're doing, give us like the elevator pitch,
Yeah.
the quick 2 minute rundown of what arcade is.
Cool. Yeah. So Arcade is a GameFi exposure platform. Is what we like to call it, and that essentially means that we're making it possible for people to get diversified exposure to the broader GameFi ecosystem from one place, right? And kind of the problems that we were trying to solve for was that initially, especially early into the GameFi kind of craze and revolution, and I guess maybe even more now, it's hard to have exposure to all of the different parts of the industry. You have to have a lot of money, you have to have a lot of time, or you just have to be a really good gamer, right? Some games you have to like have a really high skill level in order to get the most rewards out of it. You have to have 10 hours a day. You have to have 10 grand worth of money to put into NFTs. And so we were looking at all of these different problems and we're like, okay, all of these barriers are going to make it harder for the average person to get exposure to GameFi, right? It's not as easy. It's not fungible like tokens necessarily, where you can just like buy $10 of all these different tokens and have ideal exposure, right? Um, so we kind of set forth to solve those problems, and that's how the arcade idea was born. And essentially, how we've solved that is through a concept called mission pools. And I see we'll dive a little bit more into mission pools later, but essentially, it's a derivative of any type of in-game activity that yields a reward. You, as an arcade token holder, can take your token and deposit it into that mission pool, into that activity, and get a proportional share of the rewards from that player's earnings. And so there's a few different kind of pieces to that ecosystem. I'm sure we'll dive more into, but I think in its simplest form, the way to think about arcade and the token that we have is that it gives you diversified exposure to the industry. If you're bullish on GameFi, Arcade kind of gives you a single place to get exposure to the broader ecosystem without all of those barriers. And the ARC utility token really harnesses all of the upward potential of the industry in one token.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean that's one of the reasons why I'm so bullish on this. Get that diversity without having to go to each individual project.
Hmm.
Um, but all right. So obviously you have your TGE coming up soon. So let's tell the viewers more about the
Yeah.
tokenomics here. So I mean, just to kind of start off the conversation, I know there's the ARC token and there's the xARC token. So maybe explain the difference between those two and how they function in the system.
Yeah. So the ARC token is the primary liquidity bearing token. It lives on Ethereum. Actually, on the light paper, 3, 4 pages down, there should be a cool mint and burn diagram that we can pull up that kind of explains the balancing for the system. But the
Yeah.
main ARC token lives on Ethereum. That is the token one up from there, or now two up. Yeah, there you go, right there, mint and burn process. It kind of talks about the two token system, and you might be able to even zoom in on
Yep.
that. But yeah, so the ARC token is an Ethereum mainnet token. It's the one that would be tradable on the exchanges. I'm sure a lot of your viewers are familiar with ILV and SILV, so I'll draw some comparisons there. Very similar, right? ILV, the only difference there is that they're both on ETH mainnet, but ILV, right, is the token that's trading. It's the one with the team supported liquidity and stuff like that. And then xARC is similar to SILV2, just in the most simple way. And so xARC is the token that lives on the Avalanche platform or the Avalanche ecosystem. And the reason we made that decision was to keep the gas fees low for interacting with mission pools on the platform. So when you go into the arcade ecosystem, what you do is you take your ARC token, you swap it at a 1-to-1 ratio. Built into that swap interaction is a bridge from ETH mainnet to Avalanche. Once you get your xARC token on Avalanche, that's what you use to go in and out of the mission pools with lower fees, better throughput. And there's always a total supply of 800 million tokens. So the anytime you are taking an ARC token and swapping it for xARC, technically what's happening is you're burning ARC, you're minting xARC so that it keeps that 1-to-1 ratio. And then when you exit the ecosystem, you're burning xARC and minting ARC. So there's a mint burn function there. But as more users get our token and swap it for xARC to use it on the platform as it's intended, there's obviously less circulating supply on the open market of ARC for trading because the tokens are locked up in the DApp. So I'll stop there, but happy to answer any questions or dig deeper into any of those points.
Yeah, no, it's pretty cool. So just quick question on that: is there going to be a layer one ETH gas fee to make that swap?
Yeah, so there is a ETH mainnet fee to go from ARC to xARC the first time. So similar to similar to any other bridge functionality, basically, where if you're on ETH main, you're trying to get to Optimism or Arbitrum or Matic or whatever, you will pay the ETH fee to get off of the network. Now, part of the reason that we have this dual blockchain system and the way that we are distributing the rewards on Avalanche makes it possible for a user to just take their initial amount, bridge it off to Avalanche, and then your rewards from mission pools come back in xARC. So you don't have to like pay an ETH gas fee to get it back into the system every time. Once you have your tokens there, you can continue to compound them into additional mission pools without paying the ETH gas fees. But yeah, there is that initial kind of on ramp fee that users will have to pay.
All right, and so there's not going to be any such thing as just the regular ARC token on Avalanche, right? If it's on
Right.
Avalanche, it's the X Arcade.
Correct. Yeah, and the reason that we did that was so the main there's kind of a few different reasons. The first of which is that there is a lot of stability and liquidity on ETH mainnet. It's easier to plug it into all the different exchanges and the DEX and there's just a number of reasons why for exposure and for onboarding, it's a little bit easier to have it on ETH mainnet in the first place. But the second reason being that we have a very multi-chain vision for the future of the arcade platform, and having the main liquidity hub on Ethereum makes it a whole lot easier to add on additional layer 2 chains for the future. So kind of the vision here is that your main liquidity hub is on Ethereum, and then with time you'll be able to choose, do I want to interact with the DApp on Avalanche or Optimism or Arbitrum or Matic or Solana, and then when you make that choice, you'll be able to interact with the same mission pools from your layer of choice, basically, and then it all bridges back to the main liquidity hub on Ethereum. So it's easier for that main hub to be on Ethereum. If that main hub was on Avalanche, it's a little bit harder to kind of backpedal and add in Ethereum as just another branch. So that's kind of the reason that we made that decision.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So I know you mentioned max supply 8 million. You said
800 million.
800 million. Okay.
800 million.
So
Yep.
so let's just say over the next year, maybe 2 years, what's the emission schedule look like? Like how much of that is going to be out in the market?
Yeah, so we have a very long lockup period for our seed private team tokens, advisory tokens. I can give you actually, let me just on
Yeah, I
the
was just about to
side
say, is
here.
it on this slide?
It's not, but let me send you an image real quick that you can pull up and share
All right.
that shows the, is it this one? Yes. I'll just drop it in our chat here, and you can pull that up and share it if you want. But we do have a very long lockup period for all of these tokens, and most notably, our platform does not have or our token does not have a pile of emissions, right? We don't have tokens that are set aside for emissions. The only way that a token can enter into circulation is if it is coming from a sale, basically, which are these tokens that are on these locks, or if it is or if it's something that uh, well, I guess literally the only way a token enters the market is through a sale or through team tokens. Now, for the first, you can see the first 12 months, there's very little supply. Even the first 24 months is before a lot of these tokens start to unlock. So private has a 6-month cliff, 18-month vest. Seed has a 12-month cliff, 24-month vest. Team and advisors are 18 months and 24 months, respectively. So for the first year, the only tokens that'll be on the market are strategic, which are partners, KOLs, content creators, right? Those are the people that are getting kind of early access to the project because they make content, they collaborate with us, and so we'll have some tokens from that, and then we'll have the tokens that we're selling on the launch pads, which we're launching with Seedify, ChainGPT, and GameStarter, 3 pretty reputable or very reputable launch pads coming up soon. So that token amount and the 15% unlock at TGE for the strategic comes to about um, you know 1.5-2% of the supply. So it's very heavily locked in, but most notably, at least from my experience investing in stuff, the other kind of thing you want to look for is when there is such a small initial amount circulating, you want to look for, okay, how much is going to be dumped on me from emissions. Sometimes there's 40% of the supply set aside for emissions for the first 2 years or something. Because of the way that our model works, because the rewards from mission pools are backed by in-game earnings, there is no free tokens being emitted into the supply. So it's kind of a really unique. It really is a unique model to where you don't have to worry about any tokens being flooded into the supply to fuel rewards, because any rewards you get from a mission pool is a token that was purchased using money from a game, essentially. Um, so yeah, I think that kind of explains it. It's a little bit complex. If anybody's in the audience and wants to ask questions more targeted towards that, happy to answer them. But the main thing to think or to consider is that the only way tokens hit the market is if we sell them, and if we have money coming in from those sales, we're able to buy more assets for mission pools. We're able to reinvest into development for the platform. We're able to expand to new products, and any reward you get from a mission pool is backed by actual earnings from a game that mission represents.
Awesome. And I do want to get into these mission pools and more about that. But one last question on the tokenomics is, so obviously the mission pools are the main utility. Is there any
Mhm.
additional utility that comes with these tokens, like any sort of governance or anything like that, or anything in the future that might come?
So definitely more things in the future. We have the mission pools. So initially, the mission pools was kind of everything arcade was, and for the first year or so we were like, okay, this is our whole model, this is our whatever, and it still is, but or it still is a big part of the model. But now I look at mission pools as just a product within the ecosystem we're creating, not the ecosystem we're creating, right? So mission pools is now just a tab on a much larger vision for a number of different products that will come to market. So mission pools are the initial utility. All of these products we're building, the esports arcade, the creator hub, there's a number of other things I can't even talk about. Those things are all going to tie back into the utility of the token as well. So it is very much a increasing utility. Now, governance specifically, not so much. We're a Web3 company, right? But we have kind of Web2 foundation in the sense of the company itself runs like a centralized entity, right? Like we have a company that makes the decisions. It's not crowdsourced, decentralized in that sense. So we take feedback like any other Web2 company would, in the sense of like, if the community says we want to use our tokens to vote for which game is going to be added to the platform next, we take that feedback very seriously, but it's not governance in the sense of decentralized ownership. Um, yeah, and then beyond that, lots of other utility coming down the pipe.
Awesome. Let's see. Looks like we have one quick question that just came through here. And also, I apologize, but anyone watching on Twitter, if you're leaving a message in there, I don't think it pops up on this platform I'm on. So, I don't know what's wrong with it. So if you do want to participate in this chat, then you might have to switch over to YouTube. But let's see. So Illuvium Gamer says, if they go multi-chain, wouldn't it be better to use the begin letter of the chain? Oh, to describe where
Yeah,
the token is. Okay.
yeah, I see
Any
what
thoughts on that?
I see what he means. Yeah, so the we probably will differentiate between what those tokens are, in the sense of we'll have some kind of tag that shows what chain you're on. I don't know if it necessarily needs to be a different letter in the name maybe, but the ticker symbol itself will probably remain xARC, just for simplicity, because I think it could create some confusion with users if they think that their their xARC on Solana is different from xARC on Avalanche, when really it's not. It has the same 1-to-1 ratio to the ARC token. It's able to deposit into the same mission pools, so it could create a little bit of unnecessary confusion by tagging them too notably. But there definitely will be something on it that says like, you're on Solana, this is where your tokens are, and then when you bridge back to Ethereum for the liquidity hub, you would still be burning those same tokens from Solana and minting on Ethereum. So great feedback, and definitely something we'll keep in mind.
All right. Awesome. So moving on to the mission pools itself. Again, I kind of want to stick more to like how the token relates to these mission pools.
Hmm.
So I think one question that people are probably thinking right now is like, what can I expect from like a return from this? If I'm, switching my ARC tokens over to xARC and I'm participating in these mission pools, like, what's the metagame of these? Are they all treated the same? Do I need to figure out which games are going to produce the highest ROI and
Hmm.
go into those mission pools? Like, how is this whole ecosystem going to work in relation to the token here?
Yeah, so it very much is a strategy. I like to think of Arc, the arcade mission pools product platform, as its own strategy game. And the the reason I say that is because every mission, even within the same game, is going to be unique in the uh, earnings potential, or the income, essentially the earnings you can get from that activity. And the reason being that mission pools all have different, well, they can have different, I should say, what are called mission pool operators. And these operators are the players that are conducting that activity on the or within the game. So if you have two similar activities in, let's use Illuvium as an example, right? You have a 30-day mission of harvesting fuel in Illuvium. You have Najaf as the operator for one of those, and you have JP as the operator for the other one. They can be the same exact mission, but Najaf may be able to get more fuel because he has better time management. He knows the tricks. He's able to extract better stuff. And maybe JP gets busy and he doesn't get as much fuel for that same 30-day period. Well, then those that deposited into Najaf's mission pool are going to get a better, essentially, ROI on their token deposit because he performed better. And then you take that same concept and you multiply it by a dozen different games across however many blockchains, and suddenly there is very much a strategy, because if you as a mission pool contributor are keeping up with things, and you know that Najaf typically crushes it on these types of land harvesting missions, you're going to want to prioritize depositing into Najaf's mission pools over mine, because there is a slightly higher ROI. In terms of expected rewards, that is, fortunately for us at least, very much dependent on the stability and the performance of these game economies, right? We don't really tweak those figures at all. On our end, we're just taking what we're given. So if Illuvium's economy is booming and there's tons of activity, tons of money coming through, the rewards are great, then the ROI, as it were, on these mission pools for Illuvium are going to be higher. If Star Atlas's economy is going down, it's not as active, there's not as much buying pressure, it's struggling, maybe the rewards are a little bit lower, then the mission pools for that activity might be lower, right? So as a mission pool contributor with your arcade tokens, trying to pick where you're going to park your tokens, it does help to have a general understanding of the strength of these activities and their economies. If you know that one game is super hot right now and it's pumping out a lot of rewards, then you probably have a competitive advantage over someone else that doesn't know that, and they deposit into a pool that might not have as high of rewards. So there definitely is a little bit of strategy involved there, but I would say generally the expected ROI. I mean, we're really trying to keep it. So there's a few different levers we can pull. Um, the total amount of tokens that can be deposited into a mission pool essentially helps determine what each user in that pool is going to get as a reward, right? That's just pretty basic math. If you cap it at 10,000 tokens, each token is going to get a bigger percentage of those rewards than if you had 20,000 tokens, right? So we're able to kind of raise and lower those barriers. So even if it's a game that has a lower kind of median payout or earnings potential, um, the the activity for that mission pool might just have a really low cap on the number of tokens that can go in, so that it kind of normalizes the return per token that you're getting. Um, so anywhere from 10 to 20, 30% APY is kind of what I'm personally targeting. Obviously, DGens would love to see 1,000%. But what I'm really focused on is creating a above average but sustainable kind of yield that you can get from these activities, because you know at the end of the day, the the rewards are backed by something real. It makes it more sustainable than dumping them into an emissions driven staking pool somewhere else. So I'm trying to create stability for our users so that they can see, okay, this might only be 12%, but I know it's not going to be a bunch of people getting farmed emission tokens that are dumping on me constantly that drives the value of this token to zero. I want something sustainable that I can plan on for the next year, type of thing. So yeah, sorry that was rambly, but hopefully answered the question.
No, no, I like that. And the way you were talking about how many tokens get put into these mission pools, like just thinking about it quick, it kind of works naturally too. Like if the holders know that there's going to be less of a reward coming out of a certain mission pool, then they're less likely to put those tokens in, which means you're going to get a better share of the rewards that come out. Um, but I guess the next question here is: so you said depending on the game itself, the emissions that come from the game, or the rewards that come from the game, in the mission pool operator, there's going to be different rewards coming through. What is Arcade doing to ensure that the best operators are being chosen for these games, and the best games are being chosen in general?
Yeah, so we have a research team at Arcade that a lot of what they do with their time is deep dive the different game economies, meet with these games, walk through how the earnings work, what is the tokenomic structure, and so we do our due diligence before entering into a lot of these games. What we don't do is try to catch every falling knife from a random 2D game that might last for 30 days before it goes kaput, right? We're trying to pick games that we have conviction in, that we think will be around for a while, because we're not trying to give people whiplash with the number of titles and stuff that get added to the platform. We want it to be so that when a new game gets added to the Arcade platform, that there's been a level of due diligence, that Arcade has looked into the economy, that it's something that we believe is going to have a little bit of staying power. We obviously can't control the success or failure of any of these games, and actually one of the reasons that people like our platform is that we're able to be fairly agile. If a game goes down, we're not tied to the success or failure of any of these any of these games in particular, but we do our due diligence. We have a team that looks into it. The In terms of the um, what was the other part of the question? Oh, mission pool operators. So in terms of how we select these mission pool operators, that is at the moment a very manual process. You have to essentially apply to be a mission pool operator. We have a guild you know about, obviously, Banana Gaming, that is kind of like our in-house guild that does a lot of the operations, because we're able to have more oversight over the quality of those gamers. We're able to kind of pick and make sure that there's quality people doing these activities. With time, uh, and as we grow, we're going to have to branch out and add in additional mission pool operators. We might have, some operators from Wildfire, or if it's a Star Atlas guild, maybe it's the club, maybe it's Merit Circle, maybe it's YGG. And there will always be a degree of due diligence conducted there as well. But more importantly, the the mission pool model itself creates an atmosphere of a competitive atmosphere, because if you're underperforming, people are not going to deposit their tokens into your pool. The pools are not going to get filled to the point of launching. If they don't meet that threshold for launching, then you're probably not going to be someone we go back to and say, hey, can you operate these NFTs, right? We're going to say, hey, this isn't working out. You're not doing a good enough job. People aren't interested in your performance. We're going to have to part ways here, right? So once you're a mission pool operator, that doesn't mean that you just get to continue to operate these NFTs forever. You have to continue to uphold a level of quality, and you have to have enough interest from the community saying, hey, they're doing a good job, our rewards are coming in. So yeah, it's definitely kind of a balancing act there.
Okay. So along those lines, when we're looking at these, the funding mission pools here, is at some point will it say who the mission pool operator is?
Yeah, so we're in the process of going going through some UI UX updates. And so what I want people to remember, first of all, is that we are in a kind of a pre-launch, pre-release alpha state currently. So while it does work, it is live on mainnet. I wouldn't consider this the most polished version. It's definitely not the most polished version we're going to have. This has kind of been an opportunity for us to get some tokens out and do some testing, and I think it's gone really well. But post-launch, we'll be making a lot of improvements. It will say who the mission pool operator is. It'll probably say on this initial tile, it'll have a spot for the logo for the mission pool operator. Currently, all of these missions are being ran by Banana Gaming, so it is the same operator. But especially over time, as additional operators are entered into the mix, we have competing guilds that are trying to get these resources to use in mission pools. It will definitely say you'll be able to even filter by MPO, right? You'll be able to filter by your favorite MPO.
All right. So before I move on, I just want to kind of walk through one like situation here, just to make sure we have a good idea of what's going on. So, for example, we have this Mavia one here. There's you can have up to 10,000 xARC basically staked into it,
Mm-hmm.
and the expected return is 2,000 xARC. So, let's assume 2,000 xARC is what comes out of it. If I put, let's say, 1,000 of those 10,000 in,
Mm-hmm.
should I expect in a return 10% of the rewards? Does it work perfectly like that?
Yeah, so it does. Yes, it does work like that.
Okay.
Now the uh, okay, to keep it simple, yeah, it works like that. Essentially, you get a proportional share of it. The only thing that would make it different, uh, and that confuses people sometimes, is that if, let's say, only 9,000 of the possible tokens are filled during the funding period, what technically happens, so what people assume happens, and that's why I kind of just want to make it clear, because it actually is a good thing for the token. What people assume happens is that the 9,000 is the new 100%. So your 1,000 tokens would be a little bit more than 10%. What actually happens is Arcade, we backfill that remaining amount for the 1,000 with our own tokens from the treasury. And then we, as Arcade, get 10% of the rewards because we filled the empty space. But the rewards from that 10% that we get goes to its own wallet. That is essentially a token sink. We're taking tokens out of circulation with that amount with each mission pool that doesn't fill. So it's again a balancing, because if we see or that mission pools are not filling, we can kind of deduct, from a number of different factors that, okay, maybe there needs to be more demand on the token then, or maybe we need more, more interest in the mission pools or whatever. And so our way of kind of balancing that on the back end with an automated system is to take tokens out of circulation to kind of counteract maybe a too many tokens being out there or whatever the case is. So, but yeah, to answer your question directly, if you put 1,000 in, you can expect to get 10% of those rewards. Um, and that reward amount, the expected rewards, it could be a lot more than that. It could be less than that. It could be zero, right? If the mission pool
Yep.
operator fails, the reward could be zero.
Okay.
But your tokens are
Um.
never at risk. That's another thing. People get
Y-
confused.
yep. Yep. They're always coming back to you what you put in. Um. So I guess the last question would be, if you're constantly seeing that a particular mission pool you're putting up for 10,000 tokens and it's only getting 70-80% filled, is that an indication for you down the line for future ones to maybe put that max at 7 or 8,000?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So our goal is to have it as close to the demand as possible. Now, what we do, so actually we would even go below the max kind of interest, because what we're trying to create is a sense of urgency when new mission pools get created, right? It is a balancing act, but we want there to be more demand than there is supply. We want people to have tokens that they have nowhere to put them because all of the mission pools got filled before they could get to it, right? We don't want it to be to where people feel like they can just any time of the day they can go to the page and deposit because there's something open. So it's definitely a balancing act, but yeah, we would adjust those figures to be more appropriately in line. If we see that maybe only 7 of 10,000 is filling, maybe we change the next one to 6,000 and see if like there's a little bit more hype around that mission pool activity because people are kind of rushing to get in before the fill.
Yeah. Now, would this be like a conflict of interest in any certain way? Because if Arcade's allowed to fill that gap and put more of their tokens in, wouldn't that be better for Arcade?
Well, it's not even better for Arcade. It's better for the token holders. So that backfill is not revenue for Arcade. That backfill is tokens that go to a separate wallet that can be, you know, those tokens are essentially taken out of circulation. We can use them uh, at our discretion to sell them again. We can use them um, to add to a community incentive, like maybe we will do a 10% boost on a certain mission pool for a week as a promotion, right? So we can pull those tokens from there, but it is more beneficial to the Arcade token holders because it's taking supply out. Now I would say that it is a little bit of a balancing act because we do want to help balance the demand of the token with some of those levers for taking tokens out of circulation. But ultimately, I think it's more important that the that we're not having to backfill as much as possible, because it means that there's an appropriate amount of demand from our community at that time for the mission pools that are operating. If we're having to backfill a ton every time, I think it's a bad look. I think it shows that there's not enough demand for the amount of token out. So it's definitely a balancing act, but we so I guess ultimately we do have discretion to kind of pull those levers, but I think the community will just have to trust that the team will make the right decisions to balance that supply and demand, and that we understand that having a sense of urgency to fill the mission pools and not having them, you know, run through the funding period with a ton on the back end is a better look for the project.
No, that makes sense. So, quick question before we move on here. So, Illuvium Gamer just says, thinks you missed it. Where does the yield come from? And correct me if I'm wrong. The yield just comes from the the game itself that the mission pools are are coming from. So, like if you're, for
Yeah.
example, that Mavia one we were looking at, if the mission pool operator, let's say, returns, I don't know, $50. Let's put it that way. So how much of that $50? I guess this is a good question then. How much of that $50 might be going to a mission pool operator versus the stakers in that mission pool?
Yeah, so the mission pool. So in that example, if we were to walk through, and also if you want to pull up the deck, there's a good earnings not emissions slide somewhere in there, about halfway through, that kind of walks
Yep.
through the diagram. But and then we can use that as an example to talk through it. I think it's above this, right there.
Okay.
Yep. So if we were going to walk through this example here, the game in question is Mavia, as was said. Let's say that Mavia is the earnings token from Mavia is the Mavia token. Um, if you earn $50 of the Mavia token for a certain period of time, what's technically happening is we take that Mavia from Heroes of Mavia, we swap it on the open market. Key that it's not an arcade emission. We take that $50 from Mavia, we sell it, swap for ARC on the open market. We lock back in from ARC to xARC, and then that xARC is what's distributed to the mission pools. So your xARC that you're getting is tokens from the existing supply backed by the emission of a game in question, right? So that $50 from Mavia. Now, what really makes this powerful is that the Mavia earning may be, and again, not calling out Mavia. This is how a lot of games work, how basically every game works. We love the guys at Mavia, but most of the time, the rewards from these games are emissions driven, right? It is a token that is being emitted to encourage you to play the game. Now, one thing that I think is kind of unique about our platform is because the arcade token is not emissions driven, you're able to essentially get exposure to the broader gaming ecosystem without the downside risk of it being emissions driven, right? You're able to take a token that is emissions driven, swap it for a token that isn't, and get it at a, essentially 1-to-1 ratio. Now, the cut for a mission pool operator is going to vary. It really depends on the complexity of that game. Part of the push and pull between arcade and the MPOs is that we at arcade fight for you, the mission pool contributor, to get the bigger cut. The mission pool contributor is negotiating for them to get a bigger cut, right? So there's salesmanship there. There's a negotiation process. We are debating with the mission pool operator, telling them, hey, justify 20%, justify 30%. Like if you want 30%, tell us why you need that amount. And we can even pull resources or knowledge from our research team. We say, well, Kazi on the research team says that this isn't worth more than 15%. So that's as much as we're going to give you, right? So there's a little bit of back and forth there, but it's a negotiation, and every game, every activity is going to be different. If we get a pro Illuvium player to come in here and run a mission pool, they might get a bigger cut because the reward expected is going to be higher. They're a professional player. And then some random person that has no reputation might get a lower cut because they have something to prove, right? So it's definitely a sliding scale there.
Yeah. No, I like it. And when I think about it, it sounds similar to like the Revis model that Illuvium has, where you're going to be taking this and you're going to be buying ARC off of the market, right? So then that's buy pressure on the ARC token.
Yeah, so
Correct?
that's the mechanics behind it. We are different from Illuvium in that it's not revenue distribution, right? Because doesn't Arcade doesn't have any claim to any of these rewards. That we are a pass through mechanism that makes it possible for you to get the rewards that you are already entitled to. Um, if it was Revdis, that is like where you get into security regulations and stuff like that. So it's definitely not Revdis, but fundamentally speaking, like as a user, the experience you're getting is very similar. Just know that it doesn't represent equity, it doesn't represent a revenue stake in Arcade, it doesn't represent ownership of the NFTs. It really just gives you a stake of the rewards from that activity. But we're a pass-through mechanism that basically facilitates that same process, and it does provide a lot of attention and pressure on the ARC token, and that's part of what makes our tokenomic model so special.
All right. All right. So let's just get into the details of this TGE. So can you tell us when it's happening, what we need to have prepared, what
Hmm.
platform it's on? If we're coming, I mean, even myself right now, I need to figure this out. So if I want to go and buy some of this token when it comes out, walk me through that process.
Yeah, so the launch partners we have are GameStarter, ChainGPT, and Seedify. In order to purchase through the IDO itself, and this starts on April 2nd. So April 2nd is when GameStarter does their sale. Afterwards, we'll have ChangeGPT, then Seedify will release all of those specific dates and ranges, but it'll be somewhere in the realm of April 2nd to April 9th. It'll be like a week-long sale across these different platforms. If you want to participate, the only way to do it is to get involved with one of those platforms. So you could go to GameStarter, join their community. Um, Sometimes you have to stake some of the Launchpad's token to get access. Sometimes you can get a whitelist spot. Sometimes you don't need anything and they'll just let you in. So we don't handle any of that directly. We partnered with these three Launchpads to do that part of it. I will say that for U.S. residents, I believe all three launch pads require KYC. Well, I think they all do require KYC, and I think they may exclude the U.S. So us in the U.S. might be out of luck. I don't even think I can buy the token at the launch pad. But for those that aren't able to buy it at the launch pad, the place to do it would be the secondary market on Uniswap. There will be a Uniswap pool that launches directly after the launch pad. You'll be able to get the token there like any other token. And we do have a centralized exchange listing that's being worked out. We haven't announced it yet, so I can't give more details on that. But after the launch, you'll likely have a centralized exchange option as well. It's funny, Illuvium Gamer said ETH Lizards. Actually, ETH Lizards did get a free token airdrop from the arcade token. So the only other way to get it currently for the alpha testing is if your community was airdropped tokens for free that you can then use in the platform. So if you missed the ETH Lizards claim, I'm sorry to hear it, but maybe what we can do, Nick, is people that contact me through this, maybe if you're watching this right now and you want some tokens, try to figure out how to find me, DM me on Twitter, Discord, whatever, tag me. I'll send a few tokens your way so you can play around with it. It's not going to be a huge airdrop bag, so it's not meant for selling, right? It's meant for using. So I'll send you a few tokens and you can play around with the dApp. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers TGE plan. So we do have, fortunately, or it seems like we have a lot of demand. So I think the sale is going to go well. Fingers crossed, obviously. But yeah, we're excited.
Now, do you think there's going to be any option on like the secondary? Uh, so let's just say I wanted to get some of the xARC token. I didn't want to do it on layer one and get the ARC token and bridge it over.
Yeah.
Is there a way that I would be able to swap for the xARC token, say on Avalanche? Like, is there going to be any liquidity pool there? Could there possibly be someone funding a liquidity pool for that?
Yeah, so I would say I can almost guarantee that someone will do it. I have no knowledge of anyone doing it. I'm personally not going to do it. The arcade team is not going to do it. Um, but I would be shocked if someone does not go and start a liquidity pool on Avalanche because it is pegged at 1-to-1. So there's not going to be like an arbitrage opportunity there, probably. If there is, then that could be a really sneaky way for people to get, a discounted ARC because, and that's also why I think the market will keep that parity because if xARC kind of loses peg with arcade, you could buy xARC from this unofficial liquidity pool, go to our platform and swap it at a 1-to-1 for ARC and then sell it on Ethereum, right? So it'll kind of balance itself, I think. But I would be shocked if someone doesn't set up a liquidity pool. But it's not something that we're planning on doing personally. But yeah, I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, who knows if Ethereum gas gets up to like $500 a piece?
Yeah.
Probably will be some arbitrage opportunity there. Buy it while
Yeah.
ETH gas fees are high and wait until they lower and sell it.
Yeah.
You never know.
I mean, you never know.
Okay, so I have a couple community questions I have prepared, but if anyone in the chat wants to throw in some questions for JP here, we can do that. Like I said, sorry if you're on X right now, whatever you might be chatting is not popping up for me, so you'd have to be doing this on YouTube. But while we're waiting for any questions that might come in, I guess the first question would be, related to esports. So I saw in your white paper, or I saw somewhere that there might be some opportunity to fund esports players in different games. And I know that works a little different than a normal mission pool. So can you
Mhm.
explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so important to note this is not so the esports arcade is going to essentially be a new product within the ecosystem that I described earlier, and it's not one that is going to be ready at launch. So it is still in the research and development phase. We have a good idea of how it's going to work, but it'll probably be several months before that comes out. Actually, that's probably an optimistic view because I always think devs can work faster than they actually do. Not anything against devs; it's just a lot of work. But the main difference is that the esports arcade will be a single activity that has kind of two competing sides to that activity, and the player that you support, you're going to share in the rewards of what they get from that activity. Um, and if your player loses, then you're going to lose your tokens. So there is a risk of loss in the esports arcade. That's the biggest difference. If so in esports example, and it's not even technically esports, it's more like just a competition. But let's say, um, but it encompasses esports in the traditional sense also. But let's say that it could be as simple as, our JP from Arcade versus the JAFE in a best of five Illuvium arena, right? People deposit their tokens to support the player they think is going to win. If you get 70% of the amount for that mission pool, like the max cap, and I get 30%, then we go and there's a some kind of reward mechanism, right? It could be a sponsored tournament, maybe Merit Circle put up $1,000 for this activity. There's some kind of capital being injected through sponsorships, through any number of things that we have up our sleeve. But there's a reward, there's an earning. If the JAFE wins that competition, anyone that deposited into your pool shares in that earning, right? And then anyone that deposited in my pool loses their tokens, and those tokens go to the winning side. So there's a transfer of the people that deposited into me now are rewarding the JAFE's depositors. That's kind of the basic structure. Now there are a few different ways that we can do this. There's probably going to be several different layers to how the esports arcade works because um, there are certain regulations we have to abide by in the United States. Some states require licenses to do this or to let people do it. It'll probably be geo locked for certain locations. Um, but it is going to be a lot of fun to build out, and it's going to make it possible for us to have Web 2 esports mission pools, right? You'll be able to have a Call of Duty tournament with the same core principles with that because it doesn't require a Web3 injection of capital. It doesn't require there to be a payout from the activity, as long as there is a payout somewhere. And there are all kinds of paid events for Web2 stuff all the time. If there's a tournament that a player wants to enter into and it's $100 fee to enter into that tournament, you can kind of crowdsource that $100 from the depositors in that mission pool and play in the tournament. If you win, you share the rewards with the people that kind of funded your entry, stuff like that. So there's a ton of different ways we can do that. It opens up a lot of different possibilities.
All right. Okay. So we just had another question come through, and this brings up a question I would have. So SoCal says he has 7 Illuvium lands and 70 plus Star Atlas ships. Um, how can they participate? So is there a way for people to come to the arcade platform with their own assets to be used as a mission pool?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a lot of people that have bags of NFTs that they don't have time to manage, right? They don't have the time to handle the however many things they have, especially across the number of games. So part of the value proposition for Arcade is that we collaborate with the asset owner. We call them the NFT curator, and the NFT curator in our model comes to us. They say, "Hey, here's my pile of assets. Put them to work and give me a return on them." We're then able to take those 7 plots of land or whatever. We find a mission pool operator for them. the mission pool runs. Now there's just an additional cut of that amount that goes back to the NFT owner, right? So the NFT owner might get, 30% of all of the earnings. They're able to turn a investment that they purchased the NFT. They want to hold that investment for the upside potential of it, but they don't want to have to use it right now. They're able to turn that into a revenue stream for them. We actually have a lot of existing relationships with hedge funds, venture capital, game guilds, a number of other people that we have millions of dollars of assets that are already kind of pledged to the platform for use. So that absolutely is an option. It's a case by case basis. It's something we have to kind of review and look at separately. And each one kind of has its own agreement. Now, eventually, what we're building is can I leak this? Yes, I think so. So we are building our own trustless lending system into Arcade to where SoCal, you would be able to come to the platform without having to talk to me and deposit your 7 plots of land into basically a pool of assets that can then be rented for the use of mission pools by mission pool operators. And that'll all be driven by a smart contract. It'll be, on chain. At the moment, it's a very manual process because each thing has to be kind of reviewed. But we are building towards our own trustless lending solutions that are catered towards that type of thing.
Awesome. That's exciting. Yeah, I like that idea for sure. Um, let's see. I just had a question. I kind of forgot about it for a second. Um, oh yeah. So when we're looking at the pools that are funding, I'm imagining in the future we'll be able to see, is it an Arcade asset, is it an asset from somebody else, in the percentages that the owner and the operator and the pool are going to get themselves. Because obviously, if you have two mission pools that look exactly the same, but let's say an Illuvium land, one's owned by
Mhm.
Arcade and one's owned by a third party, there's going to be more returns coming from the land that's owned by Arcade. So we'd be able to see all of these details before we decide to fund that.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I would need to think about the way to display that information just because um I think there is so people would be able to figure it out definitely because if you have two mission pools that are side by side and one of them says the expected reward is 2000 xarc, the other one says 1500 xarc for the same activity, you can kind of serve from yourself, or you can look at that and be like, okay, obviously there's another cut going somewhere. That's probably a land that's not owned by Arcade. I think there probably is a degree of transparency we can provide there. I don't know that we would say who the asset owner is, but we could probably just say this is Arcade owned or third party or like NFT curator, right? So that people know, or we might be able to even break down the percentages, like how the 100% is divided up. We could probably show that on the mission pool page so that people can see where all the different parts are going.
Awesome. All right, so I think that's gonna conclude this AMA right now. Are there any final things that you want to say that maybe we didn't touch on that might be helpful to the audience?
Um, just that we really appreciate everyone's support. It's been a couple years of building this. We've worked hard on it, and we're ready to bring it to market. The platform is live right now, so you can go and create a profile at play.arcade2earn.io. I'm sure we can leave links wherever. And if you create a profile, you'll be able to play around with mission pools. If you need the xARC token, like you haven't already been airdropped it through another activation, feel free to find me on Twitter, shoot me a message. I'll see about getting some tokens in your hands so you can play around with it. And be on the lookout for the launch pads, Game Starter, ChainGPT, Seedify. Go and join their communities. Figure out how you can participate in the sale. And if you're not able to do it at the launchpad, then we'll have the Uniswap liquidity added shortly thereafter, exchange coming shortly thereafter, and maybe some whales will get together and create an Avalanche LP, and we'll see what goes from there. But yeah, really
Yeah.
appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, awesome. I think I already have some links down below.
Cool.
I know to your Twitter, I think I have a link down below for the Arcade website there too. But yeah, thanks for coming on. I hope this was helpful and informative to, all the viewers here. And we're coming up a couple weeks, right? And we can get
Just a
our
couple
hands on some
weeks.
more of this. Yeah.
Very soon.
Yeah. All right.
Love it.
Well, thanks for coming.
Yep.
Everyone else, see you later.
Thanks, guys.